A monster in the woods. The misty forests of 16th century France. Fear spread like wildfire. Children began disappearing near the town of Chalons. Villagers whispered of a beast, half man, half wolf, seen lurking near the woods. Livestock was found torn apart. Panic gripped the region. But this wasn't a folktale, it was real. Behind the horror was a man named Gilles Garnier, a recluse living on the edge of town. What followed would shock France for centuries. A tale of murder, cannibalism, and accusations of lycanthropy. This is the terrifying legend of the Werewolf of Chalons. Medieval France setting the stage. France in the 1570s was a land of superstition and religious turmoil. The country was torn by wars between Catholics and Protestants. Famine stalked the countryside. Disease was rampant. In this atmosphere of suffering and fear, the supernatural seemed all too real. Peasants believed in witches, demons, and werewolves, creatures that could explain the unexplainable. Rural areas like Chalons were especially vulnerable to these beliefs. When tragedy struck, the villagers didn't look for rational explanations. They looked for monsters. And sometimes, they found them. The first disappearance. It began with a boy named Jean, just 10 years old. On a crisp autumn day in 1572, he ventured into the forest to gather kindling for his family's hearth. As dusk fell and he failed to return, his parents grew worried. Neighbors formed search parties, calling his name through the darkening woods. The next morning they found what remained of him, a body partly devoured with distinct teeth marks that seemed neither fully animal nor human. The village priest was summoned. He made the sign of the cross and whispered a word that would soon be on everyone's lips. Loup-garou, werewolf, a climate of fear. Panic spread through Chalons like plague. Mothers kept children indoors. Men carried silver daggers, believed effective against werewolves. The local authorities were skeptical at first, attributing the death to wolves that had grown bold from hunger. But when a second child disappeared just a week later, 9-year-old Claudette from the miller's family, and was found in similar condition, doubt gave way to terror. Footprints near the body seemed to shift between human and wolf. Some claimed to have heard howling that sounded almost like words. The hunt for the beast began in earnest. Who was Gilles Garnier? Few knew much about the hermit who lived in a dilapidated hut on the forest's edge. Gilles Garnier had arrived in the region years earlier, a gaunt figure who avoided contact with villagers. Some said he'd once been a prosperous farmer whose lands were seized during war. Others claimed he was a monk who'd abandoned his vows. The truth was simpler and more tragic. Garnier was impoverished, struggling to feed himself and his wife. He foraged and hunted, but as winter approached, game grew scarce. Desperation hung over his hovel like the constant smoke from its meager fire. The hermit's existence. Garnier's daily life was harsh and lonely. He slept on a bed of straw, wore ragged clothes, and spoke to almost no one except his equally reclusive wife. Villagers who encountered him described piercing eyes and a shuffling gait. Children told stories of seeing him talking to himself in the woods. Some claimed he howled at the moon. In retrospect, these were signs of a man at the breaking point. Hungry, isolated, possibly mentally ill. But to medieval minds, they were evidence of something far more sinister. A man whose humanity was slipping away, making room for the beast within. The fatal transformation. According to Garnier's later confession, his descent into monstrosity began with a ghostly encounter. While wandering the forest one night, starving and desperate, he met what he described as a specter, a shadowy figure who offered him a magical salve. If applied to his skin, the phantom promised it would give him the ability to hunt as a wolf, providing meat for his table. Whether hallucination or fabrication, this tale aligned perfectly with folk beliefs about werewolves. The transformation, Garnier claimed, was excruciating, bones cracking, skin stretching, humanity receding as the wolf took control. The third victim. As autumn deepened into winter, a third child vanished, a boy of 12 named Marcel. His body was discovered in a clearing, more thoroughly consumed than the others. Witnesses reported seeing a large, wolf-like shape loping away from the scene. But one detail troubled them. This creature had carried a sack. Wolves don't carry sacks. Someone noticed bloody drag marks leading toward Garnier's hut but feared approaching it. The village magistrate called for volunteers to patrol the woods. Armed men began standing watch at night, determined to catch whatever, or whoever, was stalking their children. The fourth attack. The fourth attack proved different. A young girl collecting water was seized by a figure she later described as a man with the face of a wolf. She screamed, fought back, and managed to escape with deep gashes on her arms. Her testimony changed everything. This was no ordinary wolf, and her description of the attacker's ragged clothes matched those worn by the forest hermit. The girl's father, a blacksmith, swore vengeance. Along with several other men, he began specifically watching Garnier's movements, following him at a distance whenever he left his hut. Caught in the act, the decisive moment came on a moonlit November night. Several men tracking Garnier witnessed a horrifying scene. The hermit crouched over a small body in a forest clearing, tearing at flesh with his teeth. They shouted and charged forward with torches blazing. Garnier looked up, his face smeared with blood, eyes reflecting the torchlight like an animal's. For a moment, the witnesses would later testify, they truly believed they were confronting a werewolf. Garnier fled but was captured before reaching his hut. As they bound him, one man swore the hermit's hands were transforming back from claws to human fingers. The arrest. They brought Garnier to the village square in chains. People emerged from their homes staring in horror at the blood-soaked figure. Some threw stones, others made signs against evil. The local magistrate ordered Garnier locked in the church cellar, the most secure location available, until authorities from the larger town of Dole could arrive. A guard reported hearing growling from the cellar that night. Another claimed Garnier's eyes glowed in the darkness. By morning, word of the werewolf's capture had spread throughout the region. Officials were dispatched to bring him to formal trial. Contemporary werewolf beliefs. To understand the Garnier case, we must comprehend 16th century beliefs about werewolves. Unlike modern fiction, medieval Europeans believed transformation was real but temporary, often achieved through magical ointments or demonic pacts. Werewolves retained human intelligence while in wolf form. The Catholic Church recognized such transformations as possible, not as myth but as genuine manifestations of Satan's power. Legal documents from the era treat lycanthropy as a verifiable condition. Between 1520 and 1630, France recorded over 30,000 werewolf trials. Garnier's case wasn't unusual. It was part of a widespread phenomenon blending crime, mental illness, and supernatural belief. The road to Dole. Garnier's journey to trial was itself a spectacle. Bound in chains reinforced with silver links, he was transported by cart through villages where crowds gathered to glimpse the infamous werewolf. Guards reported that he alternated between animal-like grunting and lucid conversation. He begged for meat, raw if possible. Priests sprinkled him with holy water, which witnesses claimed made his skin smoke. Whether these accounts were accurate or embellished by superstition is impossible to determine. What's certain is that by the time Garnier reached Dole, his reputation as something inhuman was firmly established in the public mind. The formal accusations. The formal charges against Gilles Garnier were read in the town square of Dole on November 14, 1573. He stood accused of 4 murders and 1 attempted murder, all of children. The unusual aspect was the specification that these crimes were committed in the form of a wolf, making this both a murder trial and a trial for lycanthropy, which was itself a crime associated with witchcraft and demonic pacts. Additional charges included cannibalism and heresy. If convicted, the punishment would be not merely execution, but purification by fire, the traditional sentence for those whose crimes transcended normal human evil. The trial begins. Garnier's trial attracted spectators from across the region. The courthouse was packed as witnesses recounted the gruesome discoveries of children's remains and sightings of a wolf-like creature. Medical examiners testified about bite marks that seemed to change from human to animal impressions. The surviving victim identified Garnier as her attacker, claiming his face had elongated during the assault. When a silver cross was presented before him, observers swore he recoiled. Throughout these testimonies, Garnier sat hunched and silent, occasionally sniffing the air as if tracking scents invisible to others. Garnier's confession. The turning point came when Garnier himself spoke. Whether through coercion, madness, or genuine belief in his own transformation, he confessed in detail. He admitted killing and consuming 4 children, claiming he brought portions of flesh home to share with his wife. He described the magical ointment and his transformations under the full moon. Most disturbing was his admission that he preferred the flesh of boys, finding it sweeter and more tender. The court recorder noted that during this confession, Garnier's demeanor shifted between remorse and a strange, hungry animation when describing the taste of his victims. The role of starvation. Modern historians suggest a simpler explanation than lycanthropy: extreme hunger. The years 1572-1573 saw severe food shortages in rural France. Garnier and his wife were among the region's most impoverished residents. Cannibalism during famine, while rare, is documented throughout history. Some believe Garnier's crimes were acts of desperate starvation, later justified through the culturally available explanation of werewolfism. His descriptions of taste preferences in meat preparation suggest a mind that had crossed a threshold where human flesh became simply another food source. Hunger, not magic, may have been the true transformative force. The wife's testimony. Perhaps the most chilling testimony came from Garnier's wife, Apolline. She admitted accepting and consuming the meat her husband brought home, claiming she believed it was deer or rabbit. When pressed, she acknowledged finding a small human finger in their cooking pot. Rather than reporting this discovery, she said nothing, fearing starvation if she rejected any food source. The court was divided on her culpability. Was she another victim of Garnier's madness or his willing accomplice? In the end, records are unclear about her fate, though some accounts suggest she was imprisoned rather than executed. The verdict. After 3 days of testimony, the verdict was announced on January 18, 1574. Gilles Garnier was found guilty of lycanthropy, murder, and cannibalism. The judgment declared him guilty of heinous crimes against God and man, committed while in the form of a werewolf through demonic arts. The sentence was execution by burning at the stake, the only method believed capable of preventing a werewolf's spirit from returning. The court ordered that any remains of his victims found in his dwelling be given proper Christian burial. Garnier received the news without visible emotion, staring at his accusers with what one observer called the dead eyes of a wolf. Execution Day. Executions were public spectacles in medieval France, and Garnier's drew an exceptional crowd. People traveled from neighboring provinces to witness the burning of the werewolf. A stake had been erected in Dole's main square, surrounded by kindling and logs. Garnier was led out in chains, a hood covering his head, partly to prevent him from placing curses on spectators, partly to deny the crowd a clear view of his face, which rumors claimed was transforming even as he walked to his death. Priests chanted exorcism prayers. The executioner bound him to the stake with chains reinforced with silver links. The final moments. Before the flames were lit, Garnier was given a final opportunity to repent. According to court records, he confessed again, this time adding details about his first transformation and claiming the devil had appeared to him in human form before revealing his true nature. As the executioner lowered his torch to the kindling, witnesses reported that Garnier began howling, a sound described as neither fully human nor entirely wolf. The flames rose quickly. Some accounts claim his howls transformed into screams, then prayers, before silence fell. By nightfall, nothing remained but ashes, which were scattered in a river to prevent any possibility of resurrection. Was he really a werewolf? Modern science offers several explanations for Garnier's behavior and beliefs. Clinical lycanthropy, a psychiatric condition where individuals believe they can transform into animals, has been documented throughout history. Certain ergot fungi found on spoiled grain can cause hallucinations and psychosis. Porphyria, a blood disorder, can create sensitivity to light, affect physical appearance, and cause mental disturbances. Severe starvation itself can trigger psychosis. Whether Garnier suffered from mental illness, ergot poisoning, or was simply a calculating killer who adopted werewolf lore as an excuse may never be known. What's certain is that he believed, or wanted others to believe, he was no longer fully human. Similar cases across Europe. Garnier wasn't Europe's only werewolf. Just decades earlier, German farmer Peter Stump was executed for similar crimes, confessing to murders while in wolf form. In 1598, a teenager named Jacques Roulet was found covered in blood beside mutilated bodies in France, claiming he could transform using a special salve. The infamous French serial killer Gilles Garnier was associated with werewolf legends. These cases reveal a pattern of attributing particularly horrific crimes to supernatural transformation, as if ordinary human evil couldn't explain such atrocities. The werewolf became a way to categorize the inexplicably monstrous within human communities. Impact on French folklore. The Werewolf of Chalons entered French folklore immediately. Parents warned children not to wander alone, invoking Garnier's name to ensure obedience. His story was recorded in pamphlets and broadsheets distributed throughout France, often with lurid illustrations showing a half-man, half-wolf devouring children. For generations, travelers avoided the forests near Chalons after dark. Local traditions included special prayers against werewolves. Unlike purely fictional monsters, Garnier's documented existence and execution gave these fears historical weight. His legacy influenced French werewolf literature for centuries, blurring the line between history and horror. Historical significance. Historians value the Garnier case for what it reveals about 16th-century mentalities. Court records provide insight into how justice systems incorporated supernatural elements into legal proceedings. The case demonstrates how communities explained serial killings before modern criminology existed. It illustrates the powerful confluence of actual events with folklore, creating narratives that helped people process tragedy. Most importantly, it shows how thin the line between human and monster appeared to our ancestors, and how hunger, isolation, and desperation could transform a man in the eyes of his community, even without magical ointments. Legacy of the Beast. Today, Gilles Garnier is remembered as one of history's first documented serial killers, his case preserved in official records rather than mere legend. His story continues to fascinate because it occupies that disturbing borderland between myth and reality.